Welcome back to the R.M.Williams Outback podcast. Great to have you here. This is Terry Cowley. I'm the host of the podcast and also the senior associate editor of R.M.Williams Outback magazine. We're very grateful to Ram Trucks for sponsoring this podcast. For those of us who know the story of the Birdsville Track, legendary mailman Tom Cruise probably springs to mind. Tom drove mail, fuel supplies, and the occasional passenger between Marie in South Australia and Birdsville in Queensland from 1936 until the 1950s. He was immortalised in the international hit film Back of Beyond, released in 1954. But what many people don't realise is Tom Cruise was not the original mailman on the Birdsville Track. In fact, the first mailman was a young man named Harry Ding, and he began the mail run a century ago this year. Longtime Outback contributor John Dunn researched Harry's story for a feature in issue 155 of Outback magazine, and John joins me now. Hello, John.
Oh, hi, Terry. Nice to talk to you.
And me, you. John, you are in fact just about the perfect person to write about the Birdsville Track because you actually once travelled the mail run a very impressive 70 years ago. Perhaps we'll start there, John. Tell us about that trip so many years ago when you were a young journalist.
Terry, I became interested in the Birdsville Track while I was working for the Melbourne Herald, and decided that I would like to do the trip with the mailman and write something as a result of that in the newspaper. And I did that in 1954, found my way by train then to Marie, and I had already booked a spot on the back of the mail truck. That was the way to travel because Tom Cruise had a rule that perishables became a priority ahead of passengers. So you found a spot on the back of the mail truck at Marie early in the morning, and that was your home for the next 3 days and 3 nights, along with a variety of other passengers who also happened to be travelling along the Birdsville Track at that time.
And was it an enjoyable trip despite the presumably the discomfort?
It was enjoyable because it was so different, and you shared at the back of the truck with coils of fencing wire, bags of potatoes, some tins of canned food and fruit, and that was the way you travelled. And the people that you travelled with were stockmen going to stations along the track itself. There was a lady from the Inland Mission who was going to not the hospital in Birdsville because there wasn't a hospital then, but it was a first aid station, and also a young lady who was taking a job as a domestic at one of the stations. They were your companions for 3 days and 3 nights at 9 miles an hour. In the 3 evenings, Tom Cruise pulled up by a bore, which gave you artesian water for your needs for the evening meal, which you had to bring yourself, of course, because nothing was catered for. And then you slept in your sleeping bag under the truck, hoping that the body warmth didn't draw the attention of some slithery friends, would be seeking the same sort of warmth as you were. And that's how it was for this period of some 72 hours.
Fantastic memories. So with that in your background, you must have really enjoyed researching the story of Harry Ding. How did Harry come to have the Birdsville mail run?
Harry was a young man whose family grew up and they had a store at a place called Olary, O-L-A-R-Y. I'm not sure of the South Australian pronunciation of that, but that was on the barrier highway between Adelaide and Broken Hill. Harry's parents had a store there and also a cartage company. Harry left school at 14 to help drive the horse and cart from the railway head at Yunta to the various cattle stations in the vicinity, carting supplies to them and bringing back bales of wool or some grain or whatever commodity that they had to be growing and selling at that time. Within 3 years, he had, with the help of his father, had obtained sufficient money to buy a similar store at a place called Yunta, Y-U-N-T-A, about 80 kilometres further along the Barrier Highway. And Harry then set up his own business of carting supplies out to the station, similar to his father. He did that for several years. The turning point in Harry's career so far as the Birdsville Track is concerned was that on one occasion he happened to spend the night in Maree as the current mail operator was loading up to make the 3-day journey to Birdsville, and that was done by camels. And I think there were 90 camels which were being loaded. Each camel had to be individually loaded. And then at the end of the first day, and the camels, of course, took several days, they had to be unloaded each night and then tethered and loaded again the following morning. Harry thought there's got to be a better way of doing this, and he put in for the mail contract to the South Australian authorities and said that he would dispense with camels. He would do it by road transport. He got the contract, and for the first year he handled it himself, and then he employed Tom Cruise. And Tom then, of course, carried on for the next, I think, 25 years or so doing that same trip.
So I think Harry bought some timber trucks up from Victoria with big tyres and high clearance.
I think Harry had a couple of those trucks that he got in Healesville in use in the timber country outside Melbourne. He brought a couple of those in Victoria and drove them to Maree, and they then performed the job for him over for the next several years. In fact, he bought the Birdsville Track mail contract in 1936. Within a year, he had hired Tom Cruise to drive it, and then Tom worked for him for the following 11 years till 1947, and that Tom decided that it was time for him to retire himself.
And John, I mean, Harry Ding had some really interesting people in his background that sort of contributed to making him the man that he was. Geologists like Sir Douglas Mawson, Sir Edgeworth David, Dr. Cecil Madigan, and also Alf Traeger, who developed the pedal wireless for the School of the Air and Royal Flying Doctor Service.
Yes, indeed. In Harry's early days, he transported all the scientists that you mentioned to outback geological centres. He would take them out there and then return and bring supplies and other equipment for them while they carried on their activities. And the time that he spent with them, he said later, was very, very helpful to him. He said he was largely educated by listening to these men around desert campfires at night. They, according to Harry, taught him a lot that he'd not been able to accumulate in the very short years of before he left school at 14. Sir Edgeworth David, in effect, Harry says, taught him the principles of broadcasting and presented him with a 1924 book, The Boy's Book of Wireless. This prompted Harry, while stranded for days alongside a broken-down truck, to contemplate the need for communication, and led to perhaps his main contribution to outback life, and that was the use of radio communications. Harry had contacted Alfred Traeger, and with the help of Alf, he installed portable sets in his fleet of trucks, so that if there was a breakdown, which happened very often, he was able to phone for help and get whatever advice and assistance was needed without being stranded on the side of an outback road for several days.
In his book, Harry describes that trip, that mail trip. I might just read a little bit of it. So Ding describes the trip. It was 330 miles, so 531 kilometres each way, and normally took 3 days, but the route crossed the Diamantina River a lot. And when we had to divert because of the water, it would be up to 450 miles or 724 kilometres. The cartage price for goods was 2p per pound, and a passenger's fare was £5. Passengers were expected to bring their own tucker. The greatest number I carried, or the greatest number that he carried, was 22, which seems like a lot. John, would you like to share the description that he gave of Birdsville at that time, also written in his book?
Yes, indeed, Terry. Harry remembered Birdsville as, in his words, a land far different, a town of 21 people, a policeman and his wife, 3 persons at the hotel, 2 Australian inland sisters, a school teacher, a few private residents, and often a temperature of 120 degrees. Harry recalls one anecdote which happened on one very hot day. A prisoner passed out in his cell, so the policeman let him out, but handcuffed one hand to the spoke of a wagon wheel so he would get some air in the shade of the wagon. The policeman was called out of town at that point, and after he had ridden off, the prisoner's mates removed the wheel and trundled it up to the pub. Fortunately, the handcuffs had a swivel, so the prisoner didn't have to rotate with the wheel.
Yes, John, so very generous of that police officer to let the prisoner get some air in the shade of the wagon when the temperature was 48 degrees Celsius. My goodness.
Yes, doesn't bear thinking about.
Was it that hot when you did your trip?
It was certainly hot, as I recall. We didn't get any shade, of course, on the back of the truck. We were warned in advance that we needed sufficient headgear to combat that. Whenever stops were made, we were very quickly able to leave the back of the truck and find a shady tree to rest until the journey resumed.
There's a beautiful picture in Outback magazine of you on that trip. How old would you have been then?
I was, I think, about 23 then.
And I see that you are wearing a hat, so well done then.
Yes, thank you.
So Harry died in 1976, but you did make contact with his son Eric. What did Eric have to say?
When I started to research this story, I found that Harry had moved from Birdsville and was living at Walker in New South Wales. And he spent several years in Walker, and a book was written about him during that time. He, in fact, handled most of the book himself. Eric lived on in Walker for several years and then moved to the central coast of New South Wales. It was difficult to trace Eric down. He believed that his father, Harry, wasn't given the credit that he should have been in establishing the Birdsville Track mail run, and that most of the credit had gone to Tom Cruise. Well, in fact, that's so. But Harry was a guy who was reticent, who didn't seek publicity. The mail run was becoming better and better known, and that then led to the film Back at Beyond.
Our story was in part an attempt to address this. So I've got to ask, were you tempted to get back on the Birdsville Track for this story? And have you been back?
I haven't been back to Maree or on the track since all those years ago. I have been to Birdsville a couple of times on other assignments, but the track was a one-off adventure, and while it was a most fascinating trip, it's not something that I've cared to repeat, I guess.
A one-off. So in concluding the story of Harry Ding, I really must add the story of another legend here, and that is the man I've been talking to, John Dunn, who's been writing for this magazine since our very first issue. That was the October-November issue of 1998. John is a grand 92 now and is still vigorously writing for Outback. I know you'll be a bit embarrassed with me saying all that, John. You're a very modest man, but it has to be said. Any reflections on writing for Outback for the past 26 years, John, which of course has only been one part of your amazing career?
I've got a lot to thank Outback for, because when my journalistic career seemed to be finished, when I retired from Time magazine, when I was 65 or thereabouts, I wondered how I was going to fill in whatever years I had left. Just at that point, Outback was beginning, and I was approached to see if I would be interested in doing some part-time work for it. I readily accepted that, and I've been writing fairly regularly for it ever since. And I'm really very, very grateful to Outback and the R.M.Williams Company for providing me with the opportunity of having a retirement doing what I had enjoyed doing professionally for the previous long period of my life. And it's gone on for, for what, 25, 26 years, and hopefully it'll go on for a year or two yet. Outback has filled in a slice of my life doing stories and meeting people in the bush, because I came from the bush myself years ago, and it's a part of my life that I appreciate very much.
Well, we should say thank you also to you, John, for all those many hours, those many miles, those many times you have represented Outback so well in the bush and charmed your way into almost any person's heart that you cared to.
Yeah, Terry, thank you very much.
A reminder, John's story about the original Birdsville mailman, Harry Ding, is in issue 155 of Outback. Grab a copy or subscribe so you'll never miss an issue. There are some fabulous historic pictures along with that article too. Thanks for talking to me, John. It's been a pleasure as always.
Terry, thank you very much.
And thank you for listening. I'll catch you in the next podcast episode.